Welcome guys, gals and non-binary pals to this week's episode of Buffy Boys, your weekly review of Buffy the Vampire Slayer from a queer, literary and feminist perspective. My name is Joe, one of your hosts. With me as always is your other phantasmagorical host,
Brian. Hi, how's it going? Is it a review?
Yeah, we literally review at the end. We give it a numbered rating out of 10.
That's true. Oh, actually, there's something to talk about. I have been going through old episodes of Buffy Boys in preparation. We are obviously we're coming to the end of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the TV show. And what's nice actually is we've actually caught up with Slayerfest 98, our little sister podcast, who are now they're doing The Killer in Me. I think it got released yesterday. Obviously they have had or they just followed like a very different structure when it comes to releases in terms of Buffy episodes.
So you usually make other content in between the Buffy episodes as well.
So much content, it's crazy. Anyway, so I've been going through old episodes to find out our ratings for each episode, and to note both the rating for the episode and what we rated it. So like what the
out of what
exactly
scientifically determined component we rated it.
Yeah. And funnily enough, the average rating so far, I'm running up to season 2, so it's going to dramatically decline. Or I think it's season 3 actually, is like 7.8 for me and 8.1 for you.
That seems fair.
Yeah. It's gonna be funny. Actually, yeah. And as a quick note, if we're going to, when we get to the end of the show, so it's going to be January, February or so when we finish the Buffy episodes. I think the structure we've kind of fallen on, we suggested, is we're going to review or go back and rank every episode of Buffy. So starting from the worst going to the best over the space of our 11 episodes in which we will review Angel season 5, 2 episodes per episode of our podcast. And yeah, we'll rank all the Buffy episodes. But before that, if you maybe want to have a think as a listener, am I someone who wants to write into Buffy Boys and maybe have a quick note like read out on air in one of our final episodes? Because if you are, then let us know. If you have any experiences with Buffy Boys, maybe we were the consistent, lovely, shining beacon in your life while you were breaking up with your forever girlfriend.
Maybe you listen to us as you're burying a body.
Yeah, anything.
It's indelibly, inextricably linked with that experience.
Any of that shit, please let us know, and we will have a think about sending us an email or a tweet or anything like that, and we will we'll make a proper announcement on the socials about that in the coming weeks, just to be like, hey, be part of the end of this journey with
our
us.
Finale. Yeah.
So, and if no one writes in, I never said this.
Yeah, we'll edit out of retroactively out of the episode. For those of you kind of keeping score at home, that's kind of whatever that limited series is going to be after Buffy proper finishes. We're looking at 2 episodes of Angel per Buffy Boys episode, and probably like 10. So we're gonna
spend less time talking about the crap ones because
that's true. Yeah, that's smart.
So I'm thinking the top. So the first 100 episodes or so we're going to do in the space of 20 episodes per Buffy Boys episode, and then spend a good amount of time reviewing the top 44 or something like that kind of thing, and
look back at our original ratings and see which we're wildly out of.
Exactly, because Go Fish, which we have come to really despise, I think, because of the sour note.
Go get fucked, more like.
Yeah, we gave it a reasonably good review or rating. We gave 5 point something and 6 point something.
Yeah,
I think
I was too ginger to rate aggressively that early on.
I know, and it's not a bad episode. The good stuff in it is good fun, but the bad stuff is really ugh.
Yeah, so review our top Buffy episodes, bottom to top, and as Brian said, would love to include our listeners as some part of that kind of finale roundup. So
I was even thinking maybe maybe we could do an episode previous to the Buffy finale where we do it. Potentially
that could be fun as well.
So we'll release more details as we come up with the plans, which we do not have proper at the moment. Okay, here's your Buffy Ann summary. This is season 7, episode 13, The Killer Inside Me. It was written by Drew Z. Greenberg, who last wrote Him, and was directed by David Solomon, who last directed Never Leave Me, and was first aired on February the 4th, 2002, 10 days early for love. And here's your Buffy Ann summary. Kennedy kisses Willow, who turns into Warren, at first visually but gradually more totally. She confronts Amy, who denies knowing anything. In fact, she has cursed Willow from envy, wanting her guilt to incur an appropriate punishment. Kennedy cures her with a kiss. Buffy takes Spike to the initiative runes when his chip malfunctions, and scientists offer to replace or repair it. Xander, Anya, Dawn, and Andrew prove that Giles is corporeal and so not the first.
Very editorial note there.
No, it was and so not the first.
Oh, okay.
And I just read it with
important
spice.
emphasis, yeah.
Okay.
So we're having fruity drinks over in the Bronze, ambiguously alcoholic. What have you done with yourself this week, Brian?
Oh gosh, really busy with work. Just busy time of the year. Doing lots of walking. I've been eating like absolute crap recently. Like I've been like eating so much. Like, and okay, the conversation around food and all this stuff, obviously really toxic in the world. And like, you know, if I'm saying I've been eating badly, it's like, no,
you've been eating in a way that makes you feel sick, basically.
I've been eating in a way that because like we had so much Halloween
candy.
No, Halloween sweets. We're not American. And
Halloween candy, the phrase you can use. No one says Halloween sweets.
We do.
No, we don't.
Anyway, we had so much Halloween like leftovers because we had literally not a single collar. It was a wet and wild stormy night of Halloween night, and also I suppose just the culture that's in it at the moment. We expected a lot of kids to turn up
because we never had a front door before. Like we've never had people who can come to the house.
We were in an apartment complex previously where like you were gated off unless you were one of the like 14 apartments in our building. But
it was achingly sad though, because in the neighborhood WhatsApp group, it wasn't just us. There was like loads of people saying, so plenty of sweets still here at 42. It's like, loads here at 43 as well.
Yeah. If anyone wants to call into 71, please do.
Yeah,
and it was just like
the worst.
It was really awkward. But with that, we had tons and tons of sweets left over, so I've been munching at those for weeks now. Steadily making my way through all those sweets. And also we've been getting loads of takeaways because we're lazy. But what's nice,
and busy people with difficult lives.
But also I've been walking like an hour a day at least with Ludo, which is a lot of exercise for me because I'm incredibly lazy. And it's actually been balancing out. I haven't gained any weight, which is like, you know, very surprising to me. Again, obsession with weight and difficulty, and like, you know, talking about like eating in a disordered way. It's really crap, but also it is part of everyone's experience. I think everyone's aware of their weight to some degree, or a lot of people are aware of their weight to some degree, and what they eat. And I can't fix that right now.
I think it's not controversial to say that everyone wants to and should aim to be healthy in terms of what healthy means for them, and healthy and fit and active and happy. Yeah.
And if you want to hear more about that, you should listen to the podcast, which is called
my podcast. Gosh, we rarely recommend other podcasts on this, which is wild because I listen to so many of them. Maintenance Phase. But I have to very briefly give a shout out to Maintenance Phase, which is reasonably kind of popular or mainstream, so people may be aware of it. But it's by Michael Hobbs, which people might know more familiar from the You're Wrong About podcast, and Aubrey Gordon from the podcast Your Fact Friend, and it just gets into like debunking and talking about the various like really inculcated ways we think about food and things like, you know, Weight Watchers, what that worked, low fat diets, the why protein became important, why fat became the villain, etc. And I don't think, and I forgive Craig as well.
The actual villain is probably sugar, realistically.
Well, I don't think I go too far as saying that I feel like it deprogrammed my brain, because when I was like, it's very entertaining, but it's also very like really gets into the journalism and the science behind it. It's like I really have, as much as many people are, kind of really like brought deep into like the psychology around that, and it's a very breezy listen and enjoyable. Absolutely recommend it, and give credit as well to long-time superfan Gary, who recommended that one to me as well initially. But if you want to actually think about, or maybe like think differently about all that stuff around kind of how we think about food and exercise and all that, and kind of, for me anyway, take a lot of that pressure off yourself, recommend Maintenance Phase.
Anyway, what we actually said we were going to talk about for the Bronze Banner this week was what we've been watching. So that's what I've been doing myself, is walking a lot and eating a lot of food. But we watched an incredible movie on Saturday night at my behest, which is Titan, which is directed by beep boop 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 bloop 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 Julia Ducournau, maybe, who is a French director who previously directed a movie called Raw, which I haven't seen yet, but she does body horror in like basically all of her movies. These are kind of her two first major movies. She like a strong horror styling to her films. Her parents apparently were both doctors, and that's where she gets her kind of real fascination with flesh and its ways. But this film is notable. It is a bizarre gender like exploration with immense amounts of body horror and like.
It's hard to really give there's a slightly interpretive or slightly art house quality to it, so it's hard to give like a plot approach to it, but it's a slightly psychedelic, horrific exploration of a woman's relationship with metal. The substance, I would say, and kind of the various gender exploration that comes through that as well.
Yeah, and like, violence and masculinity, all this stuff. But it recently won the Palme d'Or, which is, I think, probably the one like award that I'll never ignore, if you get me. As in, I haven't watched all Palme d'Or winning films, even recent ones. But if a film wins the Palme d'Or, it's almost certainly worth a watch. Even if it's not like the best movie that year, it is almost certainly fascinating. It was a great watch, and it was like fascinating throughout. It didn't like not a second of like slowness to it. It was constantly moving.
It's not an easy watch in some ways. It was kind of hard. I rarely watch things between my fingers, but those parts that were like, oh, I don't like this going.
I think the only part where I was like really like, oh, was the nose part. I really found that hard to watch.
Yeah, I've been looking at our bathroom sink differently ever since. But anyway.
But really good movie. Really recommend it. It was bizarre. We also watched a lot of. We're nearly finished Midnight Mass. We're about, I think, like
30 minutes from the end.
Half an hour away from the end of that show.
Yeah. Which we talked about before, but yeah, I think now that we're basically into the end game, it's kind of, I think, justifying its premise and its thesis a lot more. It's not kind of going to go into any great canon, but it
could have been 5 episodes or 4 episodes instead of 7.
It's a little thick in places, but it's been very enjoyable towards the end. And I think the mistake or the misapprehension I think we made was we were thinking similar to Mike Flanagan's previous efforts in like The Haunting of Hill House. It'd be like an ebb and a flow, where really it's one steady build to a single conclusion.
Yeah, and the conclusion is good. I'm really enjoying the conclusion. We've also been keeping up to date with Succession. We haven't watched the last one, this week's episode yet, but Succession season 3 weaker than season 2, I would say, for sure. Yeah, I would say for sure, but like still like a masterpiece in like dialogue, character, and like humor.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think it's a great shows like that are a great, I think, cipher for understanding things like Shakespeare. And where I'm going with this is that Shakespeare was written for the masses, and literature and text that should be accessible and should be parsable by the average viewer. And there's more similar than different between a really well written and really elegantly constructed show like Succession and something like a Shakespearean text or a great literary text. There's more similarities between them than differences. And I think it's a really good one for like, if you enjoy a show like that, that's a great way to get into those, the passion, the themes, the humor, the family dynamics, all that kind of stuff. It's all drawn from the same well. Yeah, I think of that a lot when watching it. Yeah,
it's really good. Jump on it. It's really good. Like you're gonna enjoy it. It's immensely watchable and very dense and really good.
Yeah, a lot of great actors in it as well.
Yeah, really good performances to it.
And something which I want to mention about which I consumed, which I've forgotten about, is I have a book here, which is a Buffy related book by Titan Books, which is I think it's titled like the official Buffy grimoire, but it's a very, is
that the one told from Willow's POV?
Yeah, so it's a very, very well made, very well constructed coffee table style book, big pentagram on the cover, and it actually says, it does that thing where it says the author is Rosenberg,
Willow Rosenberg.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's and I was impressed by it. It was enjoyable. It wasn't kind of a cash tie-in or anything. And the premise is that this is Willow's magical grimoire, which she's been keeping since season 1, for every spell that she's tried to attempt. And she's also been writing some diary entries in it if it's related to the magic that she's doing. And just about now in season 7, maybe a couple of episodes from now, she hands it over to the rest of the Scoobies and says, you need to know everything I know for what's about to come, at the end.
This happens in the TV show?
I don't know what necessarily happens on screen, but that's the premise of the book essentially. And it's actually quite weighty. It's beautifully illustrated. There's a weirdly consistent narrative through it. A lot of it having all this fresh in my mind. It's really consistent in terms of the tone and the lore, but it's not enslaved to the lore. Do you know what I mean? Like, it includes every spell we see her do and a lot of what other people do during the show, but it's not nitpicky. Yeah. It's actually trying to just make it an enjoyable story through it. Whereas, like, maybe she has actually been, when she did this spell in season 3, it was kind of similar to a spell in season 1. So in the book, it would be like, and she actually knew that, and she adjusted it and was learning and all that. You know what I mean? So there's it's a nice bit of nostalgia through it as well. But there's also some really, and there's like comments in the margins from the other Scoobies, so there's a bit of a dialogue in there as well. Cool. But there's some stuff through it about basically Tara is kind of the main thread through it, through the second half of it, and also that from season 1, Willow has been looking for a way to make it so that Buffy doesn't have to take all the responsibility on herself. And that's kind of how it ends. Like, the last spell in the book is the spell to make everyone a Slayer. So yeah, it was like, I was impressed that it was a very high quality, and it wasn't just an info dump kind of fan wiki nitpick kind of thing. It was actually a bit of a story. So yeah, I wouldn't say no to picking that up.
So yeah, if you're interested in reading that, it is the official grimoire by Willow Rosenberg, A Magical History of Sunnydale.
Speaking of this grimoire, one of the spells featured in it is the Penance Malediction, which is inflicted on Willow by Amy in this episode of Buffy.
Oh, that's cool.
The killer in me.
Okay, so...
the killer inside me.
It's the killer in me.
I've written down the killer inside me.
What's that a reference to? Is that a Arrested Development reference?
Yeah, it is. It's because Tobias' autobiography, obliviously homoerotic autobiography, is called The Man Inside Me. Yeah. So the killer in me. I need to commit that to my memory now.
So yeah, what do you think of this episode?
I knew nothing about this episode.
How? Have you never seen this episode? We've watched this episode before.
Okay, I'm sure we did, but like, I'm talking like, this is one of the most unreconstructed bits of data in my brain. I did not go into the season that she turns into Warren, and I didn't know that Amy came back either. So
I've mentioned this to you a couple of times, and every time you've just like blanked and been like, does not compute, and you just like erase it from your memory immediately afterwards, clearly. So
so I got to go into this slightly fresh. So I enjoyed it as an exploration. I liked a couple of things about it. I like that it was a kind of a vehicle to actually, like, I feel like we've been looking at some of the gay stuff and some of the Tara stuff very obliquely for a while, and there's been plenty of times where we're like, we really should acknowledge the fact without kind of, I suppose, making a joke out of it, the fact that she's gay here. And there's been times earlier in the season, or earlier last season, where it's like, we should be talking about Tara more in this scene. So I felt that I kind of maybe a little bit disappointed that I felt like that was kind of more implied in the show in the latter stages. But this was actually just two, like Kennedy and Willow, and two gay people talking to each other, acknowledging, you know, the grief and the void of the whole Tara stuff, and also actually I thought really interestingly acknowledging that Willow in gay years is quite a baby, you know, and is quite inexperienced of anything outside of her relationship with Tara. So that nugget was good. The stuff around the kind of the payoff of the stuff with Giles and Izzy the First was tense, you know, in context. I thought a lot of the lore and the fluff around it was like really janky, you know, in terms of like, why is Amy there and where did she go and why the initiative, particularly like the opening credits or the opening preview when they presage both Riley and the initiative and Amy, and it's like, as a viewer, you're like, where is this going? That we need to know this in this episode. Yeah, it's
a funny one, and it's also, I think, those are badly done, the previews. I think, like, as in, all three of those elements are better not knowing it coming into it, or as in if you don't know that they're going to be in this episode, it's better.
It's like, there's some things where it's like, it's easier to just explain it in a line of throwaway dialogue than it is to show us the scenes of just remember all of season 4. It's like, yeah, I do. Like, I don't need you to to tell me this.
It's a funny one like that. So with that, it's I think it also unfortunately introduces like my literal least favorite thing about any Buffy canon stuff, which is the fucking nonsense around Amy reviving Warren, and they're actually in love, and like, you know, this is all, Warren has a hand here and stuff, and it's just like, shut the fuck up, honestly.
In your own defense, that's not in the episode. That's the comics draw on
this episode specifically.
The episode,
because obviously Amy saved a flayed Warren in season 6 and brings him around, and he's now like a walking flayed corpse. And he's like kept alive by her magic, which like it's just like nonsense.
Can I touch on this very briefly? Because I have been making more headway with the Buffy and the Angel comics, and I was kind of getting into the culture of what was happening when they were being published, and reading the fan letter pages and all that. It's actually quite interesting. So I'm into season 9 now, and what I'm interested in is in the fan letter pages in the season 8, season 9 books. They actually do publish quite a lot of criticism of the comics, more so than I thought they would. Like some of it is very specific, and I actually think very accurate in terms of why is Angel being let off the hook for this? This is not how the show acted, and why are we treating this abortion thing? Because Buffy gets an abortion or is about to get an abortion in the comics. Why are we treating it so lightly in this way, etc.? So it does seem to be that with season 8 and the stuff with Amy and Warren and all that kind of stuff in the comics, that Joss Whedon and the writers wanted to go for this big comic book. How far can we go? How big, what cosmic, convoluted Marvel style can we do? And a lot of people were like, I cannot follow what is happening. And it doesn't make any sense. And then for season 9 and then the associated Angel and Faith comics, where they're kind of going through old Watcher cases. They go much more back to the small stories where it's like Buffy is the underdog again, and there's no big crisis. Everyone's kind of depowered and kind of back on an even playing field, and you're dealing with monster of the week case by case, and it's actually been much more enjoyable to that respect. So the stuff with Warren and Amy being in cahoots draws on this episode in the comics, but everyone was like, this makes no sense. And also, if he was kept alive, if he was basically magicked away during the flaying, how is the first able to appear as him? And Joss essentially said, well, maybe he was dead for a second. I don't know. Stop asking. So it's a weird interplay. But I've been enjoying that kind of change of tone. In the comics.
Now you mentioned letter pages from comic books. I used to read these really wonderful collections of X-Men comics, which they were released in Ireland, the UK, and they would be basically collected 3 issues of various X-Men comics from the US, and they'd be released in Ireland and the UK 3 years after they were released in the US.
That sounds about right,
yeah. And it was a way to kind of you'd get, because there's always tons of X-Men comics, so this kind of brought them together and kind of presented them in a nice way. But they would also have letter pages from people would write in and they would comment on all these things, and it was so funny because you could tell that some people just were not aware that this wasn't a publication that was designing these storylines or had any influence over the storylines, because the people writing back to them were the editors of these collections essentially, and it'd be things like, please make sure that Scott in the future marries Jean Grey, and it'd be we'll see. And it's not only is the person who's publishing this almost certainly aware of everything that's happened in the 3 years since this was published, they have no fucking say over what's going to happen. And it was just so weird seeing people being I really hope that Wolverine comes back, and it's well, yeah, he is going to come back because we've seen 3 years in the future and he always fucking comes back. He's not even fucking dead. Anyway, it's just it was very funny. Back to Buffy.
Back to Amy specifically, so essentially what we have here is there's a motivating device for which Willow explores her both the potentials being out of the house and the stuff with Amy is to clear the path for interactions between Willow and Kennedy, which is really the core of that.
And also they couldn't afford to have all the potentials in this episode.
Because I remember you saying that to me. I'm only thinking about now the fact that when they go out to the desert to confront Giles with the potentials, he's the only one in the scene, which I hadn't really thought about. But even to that end, and disregarding all that faff I was saying about the comics, the Amy stuff in this episode just makes no sense.
No.
And not necessarily in a bad way, because that's what it is.
I'm fine with it, ultimately, but it doesn't make any sense.
But she, playing the initial storyline that she has changed her ways, and then be oh well, no, lol, I didn't. But also, I kind of am annoyed at Willow, but because she's powerful, but for no specific reason.
Yeah.
But that this is her exit from the show. Like this is like that Mig scene when Kennedy walks away from her. Is,
well, no, Kennedy doesn't walk away from her. She gets zooped back to the Summers house, like by Amy, who's like Willow has it so easy. You go here now, and it's like, okay, cool. And Amy gets punished or caught or responded to in some way, and it's like, no, never mentioned again. Just bizarre. Yeah. The end of this season really feels bizarre and rushed. We'll see that more as we go along, but it really does.
And this involves as well kind of a log of seemingly very intentionally bringing in references to previous aspects of the show in a way which is not maybe as fulfilling as in other parts of the season. So we have like things I didn't think we were going to see again. So we're back in UC Sunnydale. I genuinely thought we never saw that place again after season 4. Do you know what I mean? Back in UC Sunnydale, back with the coven of Wong of Blessed Bees that Willow was in while she was in college. We actually go back inside the initiative. We return to the vision quest that Giles did with Buffy in season 5, all this, and obviously Amy and all that kind of stuff. So really just like a grab bag of like things that you might recognize from previous episodes.
For sure. One of the things that Amy talks about though is just about how Willow has all this power and how it's unfair, she doesn't deserve it, and she's like, when she does things wrong with it, that she's just forgiven essentially. Which I think very much reflects the Buffy stuff this season. Buffy in Conversations with Dead People talked a lot about how she I think what she says is like, I didn't ask for the power, I don't deserve it, when she's talking to Holden, and she doesn't understand what to do with it. And obviously this whole season is about power and how Buffy is burdened with it and how she can distribute it better. I just think it's interesting that Willow really reflects like Buffy's struggle in this episode and her her regret over what she has done and can't fix and stuff. In some ways actually though, Buffy is while we see her as a flawed character and very genuine and well written, has she ever done anything that she's had to really regret? The two things I can think of off the top of my head is Ted, which she immediately has she can walk away from very comfortably, and then obviously what was it even called, where she and Bad Girls, I think, is that what it's called, where her and Faith killed a guy but she doesn't actually, but Faith does. I think that's called
the Deputy Mayor.
Yeah.
I think that's Bad Girls. A couple of things on that. One is the one that she actually carries, I think, guilt for, even though I suppose if a situation is reversed, this is the thing with a lot of genre fiction, is if you kill someone and then bring them back to life, are you still morally accountable for having killed them? But anyway, is killing Angel in season 2. I think she narratively carries the guilt for that for a long time. And yet one of the things on that point with Bad Girls, which I mentioned to you in reading the Faith comics, is they address the fact that I think hilariously no one remembers what the Deputy Mayor's name is. Even
Alan something, right?
Alan Finch.
Okay.
But whenever people should know his name, they're just and the Deputy Mayor guy. But everyone's like, oh, you feel so bad for killing the Deputy Mayor, do you, Faith? And she's like, no, I don't now, in the sense that it was a bad thing, but he put himself in the path by working with the mayor. It was an accident, etc. She's like, I feel bad for killing the professor who I killed, because I entirely forgot that she also just murders an innocent man who has the Books of Ascension, which is kind of a much more relevant thing for her. And we'll be talking about Faith in a few minutes as well. But yeah, I don't think Buffy puts a huge amount of guilt and pressure on herself and doesn't necessarily do a lot of things wrong.
I don't think she's ever really made any major. Obviously she's made plenty of mistakes in some ways, but I don't think she's ever been chastised by the text for mistakes she's made.
Yeah, and most of the Scoobies have something where they've accidentally made people invisible or trapped them in a house with a demon or made their memories go away, etc.
Buffy's usually the victim of that.
Yeah,
she's the one being tried for. Anyway, it's just an interesting one. So I think the Amy stuff is obviously Amy also represents kind of a lot of Willow stuff and a lot of teenage stuff, but also she was I think she's done dirty writing wise in terms of season 6 and 7. I think that Amy was a nice kid, as in I think she was considerate and kind and quite experienced quite a lot of abuse, and it's kind of a sad note to end here where she's basically just turned into her mother, where she's abusing magic and like she obviously skipped, like missed out on a lot of development in her teenage years, given she was a rat. But she also, like, I don't know. I think it's an odd one to have her be a victim of Willow's storyline, essentially, where she has to be the foil to Willow's magic knowledge, and then she also has to hate Willow for no great reason. Yeah,
she's the kind of character who, if they were more interested in doing so, would usually get more redemption or more help or more kind of narrative investment. Yeah. But I think it's also a victim of the fact that, given that magic is such a huge, probably the second most significant component in the show after being a slayer and vampires and all that, there's actually very few magic users comparatively. Like
3?
Yeah, like Willow and
4,
Tara.
Actually, I can think 4.
Like there's incidental characters, like there's Rack and people like that. There's Michael, who was the
boy witch,
stuff like that. Technically,
Andrew.
Andrew.
Sorry, Jonathan. More Jonathan. Andrew's more of a summoner of demons.
But I think people like that, and even like Giles, who has extensive magic experience, you would never really think of him as a warlock. You know what I mean?
No, I think he has knowledge of it. But I think it's funny one, because it's never really said by the text, but like Willow becomes a witch not only through knowledge but through something about how she uses the power and the magic. You know, she's not like a born witch. She becomes it through knowledge, but also it's something she becomes, and something that Giles never becomes is a warlock. Whereas I think he could have, if he, I don't know. It's a weird, like, there's indistinct properties there, but they are kind of consistent. Yeah,
no, I think it's consistent, but within that consistency of people who don't just dabble in it or use it for a scheme, it's kind of just Tara, Amy, Willow, maybe one or two other people who are like, which is what magic is what they are rather than what they do occasionally. So that's why I think Amy has to become a foil, because she's the only kind of developed character and such a long-term character from episode 3 of the show, you know, that there's a little bit more weight carried by it there.
100%. So yeah, let's talk about the queer shit. I liked it a lot, I must say. People really hate Kennedy.
We've talked about this. I'm going to put it out there. I did not go into this knowing that Kennedy was that anyone had any legitimate concerns with her. I know the obvious thing of like, oh well, Tara's dead and now she has a new girlfriend. It's like, yeah, well, you know, that's what happens in these shows. But I am not seeing a frustration. I am not frustrated with Kennedy so far. It's
possibly 7. Because, like, you know, this kind of, I mean, like, part of it was her brashness and openly queer nature, as opposed to these lovely soft lesbians you had in the start, in
kind of the Ren Fair, Lilith Fair vibe.
Ren Fair, you know, we were very private, and Kennedy's like, no, I'm loud and queer. I think that's probably part of the dislike of Kennedy. Like, you know, I would have to imagine
maybe Kennedy seemed like a much more
stereotypically
like a potentially abrasive character at the time, and in the current climate she's just reasonably like
common. This is a person everyone knows now, is just like that kind of, like, you know, angry queer person, like appropriately angry queer person, you know.
I'm able to talk, I'm able to like proactively like pursue and say, I want to, like, I think it's actually a really fascinating conversation for specifically this lens, because Willow is like a baby gay. Do you know what I mean? Like she talked about she came out 3 years ago, which, like, at the time, like, that's quite young, I think. But she's only ever been with one woman. It wasn't women she was interested in, it was woman. And that, like, all of this is like, maybe like she definitely doesn't have experience of like approaching women and gay bars and queer culture and all that kind of stuff. And Kennedy, in a very legitimate way, is like, Willow's like, this is like, again, this like this slight,
I just think that gays don't have a chance to really live their adolescent years.
Because they're racks. There's this slight pruggishness from the text again, because I think whenever we kind of talk about, when people, like, various people say things like, oh, you're kind of just giving it away or throwing it out there, you know, as Willow, and she starts to get more misogynist as she takes on Warren's qualities, but it's still very focused on Kennedy, of kind of like, you tricked me into kissing you and throwing yourself at me, etc. Whereas Kennedy's just like, you know, and Willow's like, how did you know that you like me? You don't even know me. And Kennedy's like, you're attractive and I'm compelled by the interactions we've had, which is so legitimate, you know. But I think maybe that is something that frames her as like, Kennedy's just out here looking for sex, you know, something like that. Yeah,
it's funny because, like, this episode is actually, and Kennedy does become more of a
I believe it, No, I believe it. I'm riffing. It's a back and forth. I agree with you. Go.
Okay. Yeah. Kennedy becomes more of a harsh character as the season progresses. Like she becomes one of the more rigid potentials. She's like becomes a little bit of a mini commander, and she can kind of like berate the other potentials at times, which is not a positive quality. But this is like bizarrely the episode with the most conversation about queerness in the entire show. Now the episode is written by a gay man, which I think really tracks.
Drew Goddard.
Huh?
Drew Goddard, is it?
No, Drew Z. Greenberg.
Oh, sorry.
Drew Goddard is another writer or director.
Yeah.
Drew Z. Greenberg, who, you know, he's written like consistently in his episodes, he writes queer stuff on it. But more conversation. There's conversation about Willow coming out to her mother and how her mother was like really like, you know, saw that as a badge of honor, but also like, you know, doesn't actually see Willow, just sees the label, the
political statement of
it. which is interesting and very like, you know, intriguing. Kennedy talks about like having known from a very young age, which I think is a really interesting thing to integrate into a show where the primary portrayal of queerness is from a woman who definitely did not know that about herself. Which, you know, I think is like, you know, a major conversation to have because of the like just the consistent compet kind of or compulsory heterosexuality, not compulsive.
Department of Comhet.
Yeah, which is kind of the idea that like so much of society drives into you that the only way to be happy and yourself and like comfortable is to be in a heterosexual situation.
So you can't describe something you're feeling if you've never heard the word for it in the most fundamental sense.
Yeah. It specifically is a very much experience for queer women, more even so than I think queer men. And I'm not sure about the sociology of that, but it is like consistently like a part of of queer women's experiences and conversations is around this compulsory heterosexuality compulsion, which is really fascinating. But you have Willow, who like, you know, kind of presumed that she was straight because that was what was offered to her, and she had this friendship that like, you know, was so clearly what she was supposed to do, which was hand her. And then over time she kind of realized, no, that's not what she is. And then Kennedy, you have a character who says like, oh yeah, when I was 5 I saw Gone with the Wind and Scarlett O'Hara. I wanted to sweep her. Wait, is Scarlett O'Hara a drag queen? No, that's
there's a lot of drag queens called Scarlett, but Scarlett O'Hara is
the character from
Gone with the Wind.
Gone with the Wind. I wanted to sweep her off her feet, and it's like that's a lovely, like, you know, contrasting point experience to say that like this person knew that they were queer from a very young age. And yeah, it's just an actual conversation, and then like Willow talks about her grief and kisses a woman, and then deals with the grief for the rest of the episode. It is the queerest episode of Buffy, maybe. Yeah,
surprisingly and unexpectedly, the one in which Warren features so heavily. Which is an interesting one to untangle. And I actually have to say, not a show that in the queer lens I think really has anything to say about trans people or trans issues or anything like that for or against, or that can be interpreted beyond. But in this episode we have Willow turning into a man, and it's actually to a relief there's nothing about that is kind of playing as a joke, really. It's the and there's plenty of opportunities for it. Like I definitely saw the opening where people would be like, Sandra would make some crack or something like that, and it's just not there, which is a relief if nothing else.
What I'd say is, like, as well as like, I think very briefly, I think there's an element of the misogyny that Willow communicates, which is very much a remnant of Dark Willow, as well as Warren, I think actually exists within her, which is an odd note as well. But anyway, we're actually like running out of time, so we should continue on. The other two storylines, the Giles stuff, pretty light. It's a nice, funny, like running joke. People really hate this specific note about, oh my god, did Giles touch anyone this season? And like, you know, the suggestion that actually something happened. And we're going to find out next episode how he survived the attack. But I like it. I think it's a funny, easygoing thing to be talking about. You know?
I think the more I get into this, the more that I think that one of the flaws of the fan perspective on this kind of stuff is the assumption of authorial kind of intent in certain things and infallibility. On 2 points in this episode. One is, people often mention that the initiative is in this episode, even though that the general at the end of the initiative arc said to fill it with concrete. It's a goof or an error. What if he just said that and they didn't do it? Do you know what I mean? For any number of off-screen reasons, that's perfectly fine.
And also, it doesn't make a difference.
No, it doesn't. But even so, like, there's this assumption that if things are said, then they're going to happen in this kind of storyline. Also, with the Giles stuff, there's a lot of chatter around whether he actually touches anything or how you determine that, etc. The point is not whether he did, because he presumably did, because he's human. The point is they can't remember.
Yeah.
And that's the
and it's the like, you know, the paranoia.
Yeah, exactly. That's the only active element there, is their own paranoia, rather than whether we as a viewer saw it or not. The stuff for the viewer is just to give flavor to that, I think. You know,
absolutely. And then the final note we should probably talk about is the Spike Buffy stuff. So Buffy brings Spike to the industry. The initiative.
Literally from the preceding sentences, you've forgotten this.
It just doesn't stick. The initiative, she brings him there because his chip is going off wildly, suddenly, given that it wasn't happening in previous episodes. And they have to fight a little bit. She calls Riley.
I still don't even know what they fought down there.
No, me neither. I'm not sure why. But and it is the entirety of the point there is that Buffy has to decide whether or not Spike should have the chip removed, and she decides to remove it because she has seen him being reformed. Yeah,
and it's actually a line I think that's cut from the preceding episode, but it ties in here. But Willow does state in this cut line that the chip works based on intent. And a lot of what they talk about in this episode is that, you know, it's misfiring, even though he's not trying to hurt anyone, which I don't think is consistent, because he definitely has been hurt before when he has like swung his arm out and someone's rung into it and that kind 100%. Of stuff, you know. But at least there's some kind of statement on that, you know. And yeah, the chip stuff is gone after this, basically. Yeah. It's been such a defining aspect of the character's rehabilitation into the narrative. You know?
Or like the guy in the beginning of season 7 who he turns from the worm into a person, and he stabs him and his chip fires even though he had no intent to hurt the person.
Yeah.
Anyway. Okay, should we move into the dusting, Joel?
Please do.
And then we can move to the Dust Bowl. Okay, some Buffy bits for you. So Alison Hannigan and Adam Bush both performed all the scenes, and they kind of edited it around it. Apparently at the beginning of this episode, they had Alison Hannigan perform them first, so that Adam Bush would have to copy her mannerisms and movements, and apparently it was an absolute nightmare to shoot. And then as the Warren personality became more prevalent, Adam Bush performed the scenes first so that Alison Hannigan would have to copy him. So I think it's an interesting performance. I think they both gave great performances, actually. They were both really, really good in this episode. Alison Hannigan specifically performed like such a wide array of emotions, like hatred, disgust, sadness, tenderness.
60% Willow, 40% Willow, etc. Yeah.
Exactly. It was really, really good. Apparently, Anthony Stewart Head having to avoid touching stuff for the rest of the season was a real pain, and they had to really they tried to write or perform that constantly, as in that was a note for Anthony Stewart Head for the consistent season up to this point, which is quite funny. When Kennedy gets zapped into the garden, she says the opposite of a room. She says that was a hell of a thing, which is a Galaxy Quest reference, which is a wonderful movie, which we love. And I went to see it for my 9th birthday.
Stand up.
This is the final appearance of the Initiative. This is the final appearance of Tara. And this is the 8th and final mention of Tara. And this is the 8th and final appearance of Amy, which is really funny because that includes that one scene where she gets turned back from a rat very briefly in season 5. Yeah. Or maybe 4. Sarah Michelle Gellar is suffering from a cold at the beginning of the episode, and you can kind of see it in the first few scenes where she's talking weird and also is wearing a scarf, which is quite funny. We also should note that forgiveness is a major theme for the season, and like what it means to forgive. And we see Willow attempting to forgive herself for forgetting Tara for a moment, and for she feels getting her killed. But yeah, I think that's all. Most of my Buffy bits. Do you have any, Joel?
Yeah, there's one scene where Anya's walking away on the way to the desert, and her lines are just completely ADR in because her mouth isn't moving at all. That's kind of, even in the regular cut of it, it's like really obvious. I did note that there is actually some brief and long-awaited acknowledgement of bisexuality in this episode, because in the conversation with Kennedy, I can't remember if it's Willow or Kennedy who says it, but someone basically makes the assumption that they're only into women, and I think it might actually be Willow who says, "How do you know that?" Which is something at least. I also enjoyed a couple of the exchanges where Willow says that asks whether Kennedy has some kind of lesbidar, and Kennedy's like, there's a much better phrase for that. Or when Giles says, wait, I go into the desert with a group of teenage girls and I don't touch them, and that makes you think I'm evil. Yeah, because there's just a couple of more on point, I think, jokes here that weren't like quite as like cringy at times.
Yeah.
So I enjoy it.
Okay, some fashion notes for you. So most importantly, my first 2 lines in my notes here are Joel is wearing a long shearling type jacket, because when we were watching this episode last night, Joel wanted to tell me about this, and instead of saying Giles, he said Joel. He said Joel is wearing a nice long shearling jacket here.
I dispute this, but I'll allow it.
So Joel finally not only wants to sleep with Giles, he now thinks he is Giles.
I have become.
It is a nice jacket.
The Giles inside me.
Yeah, and my second note is Joel, and then my second note is it is a nice jacket. Buffy's scarf is not a great scarf, so I'm not sure. I didn't like that it was featured so heavily. I kind of hated Willow's coat, which is kind of like a red patchwork coat. I think she's worn it before, but I just don't like it. However, I really liked Kennedy's brown leather distressed jacket. It was really nice. It was quite of the time, like cut wise, but it was really nice. Do you have any fashion notes, Joe?
No, I just enjoyed the Coven's kind of willowy. They're kind of willowy and kind of Sisters of the Earth outfits in the college things, and yeah. Otherwise, I don't think there was any other fashion that stood out to me.
Yeah, me neither.
It was normal. It was normal fashion wise.
Okay. Do you have a death count first, Joe?
Just single unidentified and barely seen demon killed in the Initiative ruins. Was it? I also want to throw in as well that I did enjoy that throughout the episode that Spike was just in the background of various scenes having a stroke, and no one was helping him whatsoever.
That was good fun.
Yeah.
Okay. And a rating. Do you have a rating for me, Joe?
Yeah, I think I'll say 7.4 lesbidars. I thought that the core stuff around both Tara's remaining presence in Willow's life, the very direct queerness of it, and a great performance by inclusion by Adam Bush, who I think is funnily often maligned because people hate Warren as a character, but he does a great job of his role in the show. I enjoyed all of that. A lot of the other stuff around it was just like completely freewheeling kind of stream of consciousness Buffy stuff happening that didn't really come together great.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a little bit higher rating. I'm going to give it about 7.6 dancing schnauzers out of 10. I liked it. Well enough. It wasn't amazing. It wasn't awful. But yeah, it was like queer conversations, good. Tonal stuff sometimes bad. Performances good. Why bad? Why any of this bad? Anyway, this is the 10th last episode of Buffy.
Wow, wild.
Yeah,
counting down.
Yeah. Okay.
Little sister's coming, etc. Yeah.
Should we move to the Cordelia chase?
Yeah. So over on the Cordelia chase, it is salvage. And it is a good episode TM of Angel.
Yeah, I thought so too.
I actually forgotten how much of season 4 of Angel is really, because like halfway through I was like, what do they do for the rest of the season? But it's actually this whole like Angelus is in it for a good stretch. And it's actually like one of the longest, obviously outside of season 2 and the second half of season 2 and all that. One of Buffy, one of the longest stretches of Angelus we have. Yeah. I actually really like it. I think that the performance of Angelus and his role here is really consistent with the character. I think a lot of the flashback stuff is like really sullen and like not fun. Yeah. When they do flashbacks to like the 17th century, but here it's like, no, he is primarily a monster that takes great glee in what he does. He's always having a great time, and I think that De Boreanaz brings that through here. He is still on the outside terrorizing Team Angel, and the crux of the episode is that Wesley decides that he is there's actually some good scenes where Wesley has to dismember Lila's corpse because Angelus, presumably just to sow discord, has given them the impression that he has killed Lila, even though it was actually an unknown assailant, aka Cordelia / Jasmine, who did it. So Wesley has to dismember the corpse to make sure she doesn't rise again, and we get some 6 Feet Under-esque scenes where Lila is talking to Wesley about his decision, why he can't do it, what they meant to each other, which is actually quite emotive, I thought, and that was good narrative, it worked. And after dismembering her and not being able to save her, he decides he's going to save Angel. And there's one person who can help track Angelus down, and it is Faith the Vampire Slayer, who is in prison in LA County Jail at the moment.
Faith is attacked in prison by the same person who who played the character in season 2 of Buffy in What's My Line, the
Order of Tarnaka, I think. The three assassins who came. So the one who played the police woman. The same actor attacks her in the prison, and there's no reason to say it is or isn't, but it could be the same.
An episode which, by the way, you gave 7.8 to.
Very good. And is attacked with a bringer's knife, so to basically another attack on a Slayer by the first. There's no mention in Angel season 4 of anything to do with the first, even when Willow comes to town next episode. So for whatever reason, there's never any assumption that what is happening in LA could be affecting Sunnydale. So there's like a lack of communication between those two plots. But yeah, basically, there's a great scene where Wesley goes to explain the issue to Faith, and she's like, I have to stay in here, do my time, etc. And then Wesley, says, Angelus is free and Angel is gone, and Faith says, step back from the glass, and like jumps out of the prison window and goes on the run, and basically comes in and coordinates the team to track down Angelus. And Connor is all impressed by how great she is, and she
couldn't give less of a shit about him, which is breath of fresh air,
which is enjoyable. The only person Gunn has ever liked on the show is Faith, apparently. I think it does a pretty good job of showing Slayers are still something different. That she has an innate ability and a learning capacity that is more than just being strong. So I enjoyed all of that.
She ends up fighting the Beast with who has teamed up with Angelus, and while she's fighting him, she gets the shit kicked out of him by the Beast, and then Angelus, being the chaotic little gremlin he is, stabs the Beast with the dagger,
the Beast knife, and kills him, and the Beast explodes. The sun returns to Los Angeles. Angelus is about to kill Faith, and she smashes the glass to let sunlight in, and he has to like skulk away to return another day. But
even though Angel and Angelus are by all accounts immune to sunlight.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The exchanges between Faith and Angelus are really strong. The whole dynamic between a much more damaged Wesley now essentially effectively being able to act as her watcher, which he was meant to do a long time ago. The dynamic between the three of them, where Angel's the only person who can never give up on Faith, so she doesn't want to give up on him. All of that is really good, and it's really Eliza Dushku, Faith, amazing.
Just love her.
Works really well. I continue to feel so sorry for Charisma Carpenter, because this storyline of possessed Cordelia having to play this really flat master of the Beast character with no real motivation.
Who's now pregnant.
Yeah, so there's a scene where she makes out with the Beast, which doesn't make any sense even when you know it's Jasmine. At the end, tells Connor, again, supposedly still behaving as Cordelia, says, by the way, we're having a baby, etc. That is terrible. But overall, I'm going to say 9 failed feminist gestures for this episode.
I'm going to give it 8 strong failed feminist gestures.
It's a 9 for me, because Faith and Angelus and a reformed, rebuilt Wesley coming together, that is a TV show in and of itself. Also to note, there's a scene where Angelus calls Sunnydale because he hears a Slayer is in town, and talks to Dong and says, hey Dong, is your sister home? She is, okay, and hangs up. And that is the only interaction between Angel / Angelus and Dong in the canon.
That's so
essentially funny. So I enjoyed that. Okay, so fun episode, good energy, I think, going forward into the season. Thank you very much for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, please let us know. Tell your friends, tell the monsters you've forgotten in your basement, and we will see you next time right here on Buffy
Boys.
See ya.
We'll let you give me more information about the conclusion of Buffy Boys soon.
See ya.
Bye.